Okay, so for this video, we're going to talk a little bit about brushes. The logic for configuring this tool is present in a lot of other tools that don't function nearly the same way as the brush tool does. But learning to configure these tools is another critical skill in being able to express yourself in this program. So we're going to start from the beginning. Okay? Now, if your toolbar is set up as a single line toolbar, as mine is here, then your brush tool will be underneath the Band-Aid tool and above the clone stamp tool. If you have the double wide, then you're going to be looking at it's underneath the eyedropper and it's next to the Band-Aid tool. Now, a very simple tool here. As soon as you begin to use it, you're going to see that you have a little circle over here. Now, this is the empty space. This is not part of my canvas, so I can't actually paint anything here. But what you'll see is the shape and the size of the brush is represented in that little circle. Now, just so that you know, if for some reason you decide to take this tool for a spin and you do not get that circle, instead you have a crosshair, it means your caps lock key is on. The caps lock key changes from being a precise crosshair to an actual representation of the brush's size. Now, my color here is set to black, so all I'm going to do is I'm just going to click and hold and paint, and that is literally as simple as it is. But what if I wanted to do something more complicated? For starters, what if I don't like the way that this brush is actually laying down color? So let's see if we can change the way that that behaves. We're going to get rid of that, and we're going to come up here to the options bar. As you remember from previous video, this is where specific settings for tools can be found. And here, by clicking this little arrow next to the size and the number, you can change the way that these brushes behave. There are all sorts of presets, and as you can see here, there are some that look incredibly non-traditional. I'm going to hover over this for a second. This one's called Spatter, and it's 24 pixels wide. That is tiny. I'm going to make it bigger. I'm going to make it 180 pixels, and now I have this. Check that out. Much better. Maybe I want something that's actually as a pattern. Let's come back here. Let's undo that painting. And I want to paint with grass. I can't see. That looks way too small again. I'm going to bump its size way up, and I'm going to paint with that. And this one behaves completely differently. Not only does this one paint in what looks like grass, but they're at different angles and different shades. They've actually painted down not just black, but every step of black between black and white, which is awesome. Okay, so that was an example of some presets. But what if I want to just do some rather fine control on just a regular circular brush? Right now, I am painting just pure ugly black. And it doesn't look like much, and it looks really like a sad Hershey kiss. Come back to your options panel and your brush size here. You can change the pixel size using this slider, which will allow me to have a larger diameter brush for me to paint with. Or I can change the size to be smaller, and I can work with a smaller brush. Now, we're just dealing with size right now, but there's another feature that we have to learn, and you guys are going to giggle about it, okay? But it is called the hardness setting. Now, the hardness setting at 100% means that I have a completely solid edge. I have nothing but pixels going all the way to the edge of my circle. Okay, make sure you get your giggles out, okay? Because we are going to be playing with the hardness of this brush. And I want my brush to be a little bit bigger. I'm going to bump it up to 300 pixels wide. And this is what the brush looks like at 100% hardness. We're going to come here and we're going to change the hardness to 50%. And that is what the brush looks at 50% hardness. And then we'll come back here one more time and we'll put it down to 0% hardness. Okay? All three of these lines are technically the same size, but because of the hardness settings, the edge of the brush will look different. And if I zoom in, you'll see this is the edge of my 100% hardness. This is the edge of 50% hardness. It starts blending the color out. At 50% of its diameter, it starts blending the color out so that we don't have a hard edge. This is called feathering. And then at 0%, almost from the get-go, we start having a slow blend of solid black color all the way to the edge of the brush size, going to complete transparency. If you remember from the face swap video, I had mentioned briefly that I changed my hardness setting on my eraser, and this allowed the eraser to have a transparent edge, so as I was erasing Josh's face, his skin color was somewhat blending into Jennifer's skin color, so that the faces looked like they could have sort of maybe supposed to have been together like that. Alright, so that's what we're dealing with. Now the question is, what if we want to deal with color? Well, I got your answer right here. Okay, so we're going to go back to our brush tool, and I'm going to bring my size down, and I'm going to bring my hardness back up to 100%. So I'm coloring in black, and black is blah. So how do we change the color? Well, there's two ways to do it. I mentioned this in the very first video, that you have a color panel over here, and you have the color picker here on the left. Sometimes it's easier to use one versus the other. And one of the reasons why it might be easier to use the color panel is because you have direct control without having to do any extra clicking. If I want to use the color picker to change my color, I'm going to have to click once, which is an extra step, and then choose my foreground color. And that's one way to do it. And I'm going to choose 100% red, which is represented down here as 255. I'm going to click OK, and now I can paint in red. However, if I wanted to paint in blue and skip myself an extra step, then I can come over to the color panel, and I can drop the color all the way down here and bring my blue all the way up, and now I can paint in blue. And likewise, I can paint in green. What's nice is, as you're playing with the color panel over here, you can see that if I've cranked my green to the max, it's going to show me what adding red is going to do, and it updates dynamically. So if I decide that I'm going to add red, then now my green looks like a slightly different color. It's a slightly lighter, more disgusting version of green. And if I crank the blue to the max, then I get this sweet looking cyan. And if I decide now that I want to bring the green all the way back down, I can have a really cool looking purple. We're going to bring this all the way up now, and I'm going to get myself a magenta stripe in here, and I'm going to bring this halfway, and I'm going to get myself a sweet looking, oh, that's not very sweet. That's like a starting to rot peach. Whatever. The last thing that I want to show you is just a quick and easy set of keyboard commands that can make your life a lot easier and a lot more efficient. In this little setup here, I already have a blank workspace that I'm playing with, and I am going to have my color picker set so that my foreground color is cyan and that my background color is this neon green. Now normally, as you've already seen in this video, if I start painting, I'm going to start painting in blue because it's my foreground color. But with the simple press of the X key on your keyboard, you can swap the foreground and background colors. So now my foreground color is green and I can start painting with that. And every time I hit the X key, I just switch them back and forth. And that's very simple. Now what about changing the size of the brush on the fly? That's also easy, and it's the bracket keys on your keyboard. As I paint, I have a specific diameter that's already been set. It's at 150 pixels. If I use the open bracket key on my keyboard, you'll see that the diameter has shrunk. Now bear in mind that this will not work in the middle of you drawing a line, it'll only work in between you drawing lines. But here I go with my smaller line. Now I'm going to use the close bracket key and then alternate back and forth, and you'll see that my brackets are changing the size of my brush on the fly.